Okay, my name is Debbie Lehman. I'm the children's librarian at Bayliss Public Library, now a part of Superior District Library. Introducing Saroj Ghoting, who's a pre-literacy specialist, come all the way from Virginia to educate us on working with very young children on pre-literacy. This program, Opening Minds to the Culture of Language, is made possible in part by a grant from the Michigan Humanities Council, an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Michigan Humanities Council. Saroj, can you tell us in short little sound bites something that you, from this program tonight, something that you think that parents, teachers, daycare providers could take away from this in just a short little, tiny little bit? One thing that we were interested in was the importance with letters. It was the shape of the letters. Yeah, could you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the things that researchers have found is that children learn letters by their shapes. So very young children, in order to help them to get ready to read, we don't want them to be kind of just having like flashcards of letters. The most important thing that you can introduce them to is shapes. So when a baby is playing with a ball is a sphere, and when a sphere becomes two-dimensional, it becomes round and it becomes a circle. And when children are figuring out letters, they're saying, oh, let's see, a circle is round, and we have what? We have a B. That's two circles with a line down the side. So children are learning, they notice shapes in letters, and that's how they're trying to then identify letters by their shapes. For example, when children play with blocks, they might be playing with a triangular prism block, which when it's two-dimensional becomes a triangle. And triangles also help us to identify different letters such as the W or the A. So a child then is going to say, oh, look at the triangles in this. Look at the three triangles. That makes that a W. Or here's a triangle and an A. So when you help children learn shapes, you're also later helping them, setting the groundwork for learning letters. The second concept that they need to know is alike and different, because many letters look very, very similar. So they need to figure out, well, what makes one letter different from another? So a lowercase h and a lowercase n are very similar, except for the height of the line. So if they notice similarities and differences, that's also helping them with letter knowledge. There's so many ways that we can help them see similarities and differences. When you're clipping coupons and you go to the store, you have to match the coupon to the right product. When you are sorting laundry, you're putting similar things together, or the patterns on the socks, they have to match those. So there are lots of ways that really, whether you know it or not, you can help your children identify letters, which will later help them get ready to learn to read.
Saroj, could you talk a little bit about the response time for a toddler, from the time you speak to the toddler to the time he responds? I think all of us found that very fascinating.
Yes, and that was something also that I learned also when I was doing the Every Child Ready to Read at Your Library program, and that is that our toddlers need extra time to respond to us during conversation. When we really need to encourage young children to speak, and in order to do that, they need time. And what the researchers have found is that toddlers and young twos need anywhere from 5 to 12 seconds to respond to what we say. And that's because connections need to be made between 4 different parts of the brain, where that we hear things, where we see, where we generate the words, to know what to say, and then to actually speak the words using our tongue and lips and so forth. 4 different parts of the brain have to work together in order for a child to respond to what we say. So for very young children, they need more time because they haven't had the practice that we do. As adults, if I ask you a question, you can respond in a split second because you have years and years of practice. But for our very young children, we need to give them the gift of time. And that means waiting 5 to 12 seconds, which is a long time for them to respond. Very often, we ask them a question and they don't answer us. They just kind of stand there. And we think, I think maybe I asked the question in a little bit too hard of a way. Let me re-ask the question a little bit easier so then it will be easier for my child to respond. Or maybe I should just tell him the answer. He doesn't know the answer. So we might jump in a little too early and give the answer, or we might ask a second question. Now the poor child has to figure out whether he should answer the first question that he was just starting to answer, or should he start all over with the second question, which he takes as a whole new question. Whereas if we had just waited a little bit extra time, the child would have responded. Giving children that extra gift of time is what helps make those connections in the brain and will make it easier for them to respond to us as time goes by. They won't always need 5 seconds to respond.
Saroj, can you talk a little bit about, I know parents struggle with this, they want to read to their children, the 15 or 20 minutes a day that's prescribed, but their child simply won't sit still for it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That is such a common thing. It's with many age children, and with our young children, we want to make sure that the most important thing is to have some enjoyment around reading. In fact, researchers have shown that children who have positive experiences around books and reading are more likely to stick with learning to read when they get to school, even if it's hard. And over half our children find learning to read difficult when they get to school and are being taught to read. Over half our children find learning to read difficult. So if we can give our children positive experiences around books and reading, those are the children who are more likely to stick with learning to read longer because they know that in the end it's an enjoyable experience. So what are some of the things that we can do to help with that? First of all is don't force yourself to read the whole book in one sitting. If your child, especially like a 14-month-old or a very young child, will only sit for 30 seconds or 60 seconds at a time, go ahead and have an enjoyable time around that book, however short it may be. Because if you have an enjoyable time around the book, it's naturally going to get longer and longer, as the child even may come up and ask you, either hand you a book or ask you to read a book to them because they have had an enjoyable time around the book with you. Another thing to consider is, what are your child's interests? Are they interested in trucks? Are they interested in princesses? Are they interested in cars? So go to the library and ask the librarian for some help. Say, hey, my child is interested in snakes or spiders or rabbits or whatever it might be, and the librarian will help you find stories about it, but also true books on that particular topic. So there are lots of ways to engage your children around books. Another way, and this is A Splendid Friend Indeed by Suzanne Bloom, and in this book you could, for example, maybe you've read a couple of pages and then your child is losing interest. You might say, hey, Justin, your child, how do you think this polar bear is feeling? And you might have them look at the polar bear and talk about how that polar bear might be feeling and when he's felt that way. So when you relate something in the book to the child's experience, that's another way to keep their interest. No, you might not get through the whole book in one sitting, but you still made an enjoyable experience around the book. And there are many more tips that your own librarian can tell you too. Just go to the public library and find out.